Am I the a-hole for making my son live with his mother, stepdad, and three-step siblings after he verbally abused my husband? This entire situation is kind of screwed, and honestly, I'm a bit heartbroken for my husband. Real name's IDC, I'm Sean 37. My husband is Zach 30, and my son is 16, not saying his name. I divorced my ex-wife after she cheated on me for the entirety of our marriage. That was over a decade ago, IDC anymore. Son is mine, already over and done. I met Zach when I was 28, my son was 7. Me and Zach hit it off instantly. I was finally in a place to start dating again, and thankfully he was the first person I was interested in. We connected on everything me and my ex-wife did and a million more things. People say life has a plan for you, and honestly, I believe it. I'd go through a million more divorces and being cheated on over and over if I ended up with him every time. One of the big things was my son. Zach was hesitant at first just because of the situation, but he wanted a family badly, and I was excited for him to meet my son. After dating for a year, I talked to my ex and told her I'm introducing our son to a guy I'm seeing, told her it's serious and I see a future with him. She was happy for me. We have a very good relationship now, just told me to tell her when I was going to do it, so she can be prepared if our son had any questions for her when he visited next. Zach and my son were best friends, did everything together. They loved playing Minecraft together. They spent hours sitting in front of the TV. I loved watching them. I was so happy the first person I found after my ex was this amazing. After about 6 months, I asked Zach to move in, and the rest is exactly as I've been describing. Amazing. My son started calling Zach his other dad when he was 10. Very sweet moment, which makes this hurt worse. Well, last weekend my son had 3 of his friends over. They were playing video games in his room, and I just left to do grocery shopping for the week, so it was just them and Zach. I don't know how this topic came up, but things got very homophobic. My husband was sitting on the couch, and I guess my son and his friends thought me and him left, but it was just me. My son's room is connected to the living room, so if you're sitting in the living room, it's not super hard to hear what's going on in his room if he's being loud enough. 4 teenage boys playing video games. One of them said, "How's it feel having a F slur?" I don't know if I can say it or not on here, as a father. My son laughed and said kinda shitty. They said my husband probably touched him when he was little, and my son replied, "He can try it, now he'll get his ass beat." So not even being a dick to Zach, but now also threatening him over something we all know he would never do. They kept saying shit like, "Which one do you think takes it in the ass? Probably the F slur. At least your real dad still likes women. Just a bunch of hateful shit." My husband sat there listening to it all, silently crying. Also, Zach has spent good 4 hours a day at the gym for the last 3 years, so I don't know who's getting their ass beat, but it ain't him. I got home about 2 hours later to my husband sitting in his car with a bag packed waiting for me so he could leave but didn't want to leave my son alone. I asked, "What's going on? Why are you leaving?" And he told me everything. I tried to understand as best I could. I insisted he wasn't serious, he's just being a stupid kid acting tough with his friends. But it didn't matter, the damage was done. Zach left and I went inside and went off on my son. His friends left and I spent a good 3 hours going back and forth with my son. At first he was very unapologetic and kind of agreed with his friends. I asked if he actually thought my husband sexually abused him when he was younger, and he said, "No, but kids block those kinds of memories out, so really who knows?" I told him to pack his shit, he's living with his mother. His mom lives 3 hours away, which means new school, new friends, if at all, less private space as he'd have to share a room with his stepbrother, etc. Just everything that you'd expect going from a single kid in a house to one of 4. My son instantly changed his attitude. He was crying, begging me not to send him away. He didn't mean it. He was just lying to seem cool to his friends. I asked why did he double down when they left, and he didn't have an answer. I told him to pack his shit, he's leaving in the morning. Called my ex, told her the situation, and she agrees. He needs something drastic. What he did wasn't okay at all. Fast forward to now, and my husband is back, but he cries every night. Honestly, it feels like he's mourning, which I don't want, because when you mourn, you don't get over someone. You get as close to indifferent as possible to keep living your life without them. I don't want that. I want my husband and my son to have that strong bond I know they have, and don't want them to throw it away over this. I don't agree with what my son did, but those accusations at minimum can ruin someone's life and at most end it. I'm disgusted with my son. He calls me every day, tells me he misses me and Zach and wants to come home. I stay strong on the phone, but after I break down, and my husband tries to console me, tells me my son can come back and he will leave. But no, I'm not doing that. I just don't know what to do. I miss my son. I miss coming home and seeing them spending time together. I've thought about therapy for him, but he said no. You can't force therapy on someone. They'll just sit there for an hour and piss away $400. I need advice. Now for the update. This will be long. Sorry. Not going to lie, entire original post was basically a disaster. I expected a few replies with only one actually being helpful, and then the post die. Didn't happen that way. Wish it did, though. So much back and forth and so much hate towards me being gay. I expected some, but holy shit. I was done with that post when someone suggested me and my husband both abuse my son sexually. Just no. Disaster. I thought living in Bum F, Montana was bad with the homophobic shit I deal with. As for the update, I spent the day yesterday with my son. A lot of people accused me of not taking his claims seriously. I did. The first 30 minutes of our initial talk when this all happened was about if he actually was abused. He said no. I asked again when I got here. I made sure to let him know there is no one I'd believe over him. He won't be punished for saying the truth if he was abused for not, but I needed to know. Again, he said no, he was never touched or raped by my husband. On to the questions and his answers. Why would you say something so dangerous? My son said he was feeling rejected by my husband since, as of late, he hasn't been spending nearly as much time with him. Which is true. A large part of my husband's life is my son. Zach tutors him. He coaches him in his sport, basketball. He goes on morning runs with my son. He used to drive him to and from school before my son got his car. Just they both share a lot of interests. And as a kid-step-parent dynamic, they spend a lot of time together. Towards the end of last year's summer, when my son was still at his mother's, my husband talked to me. He said he wanted to start spending more time apart, but not that kind of apart. He wanted to have more of a social life. He wanted to be able to do things away from us, but not like separate, if that makes sense. He realized my son would be leaving for college in 2-ish years, and my son was such a large part of his life, he didn't want to become depressed after he left with nothing to do. I agreed, said it was a good idea, and he had my full support as long as he still came home every night at a reasonable time and didn't let his relationship with my son suffer or anything. As of now, yes, it is different. My son doesn't need rides to school, he doesn't need tutoring, he doesn't do basketball anymore. Their hobbies are still the same, but my husband has been spending less time at home. It's not like he's gone all hours of the day and comes back at 3 a.m., but he has a healthy social life. I don't know how to explain it. Do you realize how dangerous it is to say something like that if it isn't true? He said yes, and he didn't think anyone was listening. He was just going along with his friend's shit. That didn't make sense to me, so I asked, why did he stand by his statement after I sent his friends home? He said he thought he shouldn't back down from something he says. Kind of like a ride or die, I don't know. I told him that's stupid and never do that, especially if he regrets what he said and it wasn't true in the first place. He said he knows he realized that when it happened, but he just couldn't stop himself from keeping it up. It didn't hit him that it was serious until I told him he's going to stay with his mother. Why do you want to be friends with people that talk so much shit about your parents? He doesn't want to, but the kids bully the shit out of everyone they don't like, and he feels like he's in too deep to back out now. That I do understand. I had kids in my school like that. Bully everyone. They were cool to me, though, until they found out I was gay. Then they screwed my last few years of high school up. I told him I get it to some degree, but he doesn't have to add in to what they're saying. Small chuckle and a F you is usually enough to get people to move on from something. I also asked about them bullying him because they kind of were. He said, yeah, but they're not that bad with it. They just rip into him every so often about having gay dads, and I guess over time it made my son feel poorly towards my husband. The distance my husband was setting with my son, mixed with his friends saying the shut they do, just added up to that. I told him I understood. I want to make it clear, I don't support what he said. I understand the emotions behind it, though. Why didn't you talk to us about how you were feeling? He said he didn't want to start anything. My husband and him are still close. He didn't know how he felt and was more confused than anything. So why say something that would cause a fight if he didn't even know if he felt that way? I also understood this. At this point, I think this is just one miscommunication after another. Open dialogue would have prevented all of this from happening. There were a lot more questions, but me and my ex ended with, "Do you actually feel remorseful for what you said, or are you just tired of sleeping in the same room as a 7-year-old? He's actually remorseful. Told me even if he was staying there all year, he would still feel terrible over what he said about Zach. Reassured him again if anything did happen. Now is the time to speak, and I will believe him again. He said no. He started crying, saying he just missed us. Emotional moment we hugged, told him I loved him, and that would never change. Asked him to leave the room so me and his mother could talk. We decided on a month-to-month assessment to see when he would get privileges back, ending with him coming home. There were conditions to all of this, like family therapy, solo therapy, cutting his friends off completely, which I would help with. He was against the solo therapy, but came around. He asked if Zach was here. I said no, but would ask him if he wanted to come next time, which my son smiled at. I still agree sending my son to my ex-wife's was the right move. A lot of people aggressively disagree. Which is fine. My parenting style isn't for everyone. One of you told me I should beat the kids up, though, so do I really care if some of you disagree with how I patent? I don't know. Not really. Situation still sucks. I don't know what to say. I miss my son. He isn't coming home right now, and I wish I was leaving her house with him. As it stands right now, son is living with his mother and her family. He will get his phone and PS5 and car back at the end of the first, second, and third month in that order. He will be able to move out of the room he's currently in, out into the guest house at the end of month 4. Every month after that is touch and go, and we'll discuss at the end of each month what we think. Son will do bi-weekly solo therapy, and we will all do bi-weekly family therapy. We see it as he should do solo therapy 1 week, then family therapy the next. He can come back sooner. I want him back. My husband wants him back. He's wanted him back since he left. His mother is holding strong, but she also sees he's just miserable, so I think she'll break at some point and give up the guest house early. It is what it is. At the end of the night, my son asked if Zach would want to hear from him, so he could apologize, and I told him yes. I've told him yes a few times now. Zach would love to hear from him. I doubt he'd have to wait longer than 1 ring before Zach picked up. My son called him as I was leaving, so I know they spoke. I don't know about what, though. When I got home, Zach was feeling like shit and blaming himself more for all of this. I told him it's no one's fault, we just needed to talk to each other more. All in all, I think my son is remorseful and he was just feeling trapped and isolated in a shitty situation and didn't know how to get out of. I feel for him, and I wish I saw what was happening sooner. Thank you all for the advice. Or most of you. Some of you were just nasty and hateful. Someone on my first post called Stoner Therapist, something like that, gave good F advice. I didn't say it on that post, but if you read this good shit, thanks for it. Next update will be when he comes home. Hopefully it will be soon. Thanks you all. Story 2. I had a stalker for 16 years, and he just died. I, 33F, just learned that my stalker, 34M, died yesterday. Lots of trigger warnings. Death of a young person, stalking, suicide, SA. I dated Nathan for a couple of months in high school. It was a terrible decision of mine. It didn't take me very long to see that he was a violent, angry person with an abusive and scary father. I once saw his dad run his massive truck through an endangered species sanctuary on our local beach laughing. Another time, he showed me his cabinet of guns and pointed a loaded shotgun at me. I also saw Nathan and his brother beat each other bloody in their living room until their dad came in and knocked them both out. All of these things happened within the span of a month, and I obviously left quickly. Toward the end of high school, Nathan was diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder. I feel like I should mention that I do not believe that schizoaffective disorder makes someone violent like him. He was always that way, and it just exacerbated other elements of his personality. Not too long after his diagnosis, he dropped out of school and hunkered down in his room in his parents' house in front of his computer, unmedicated and fueled by alcohol and cigarettes. For whatever reason, when his disorder was triggered, he became hyper-fixated on me. He started messaging me hundreds of times a day, so much so that I changed my number. Then he started messaging me on Facebook, and his messages were becoming more and more sexual and violent. He'd write me terrible things about how he wanted to kill me through F my face so hard, for example. And he would say it in much worse terms than that. He started messaging my family and friends too, telling them terrible, gross, and violent things about me. He'd threaten to kill any person I dated. Remember, I was receiving hundreds, if not thousands, of messages like these a day. He'd also post on online forums with my full name saying disgusting things that were easily findable with a quick Google search. He tried to take his life through pills around 18 years old, but was unsuccessful. But after getting resuscitated by his mom, he had a come-to-Jesus moment and became obsessed with Christianity. He began messaging me even more, and every message was either violent and sexual, or about Jesus, or a racial slur about someone, etc. I probably blocked over 200 accounts of his. One day, something happened that finally made us go to the police. He didn't know that I had recently moved out of town for college, and he decided to go to my parents' house looking for me with a van and a scary guy who we later found out had a gun and a record. My mom was alone, and it scared us all so much that we decided to go to the police. The female cop who I talked to told me, "It takes two to tango," and did nothing. We couldn't believe it. Years went by. No more van appearances, but hundreds of thousands of messages. Vile, disgusting, traumatizing messages. All he did was sit at his computer, play WoW, and harass me. I filed for a restraining order and eventually was assigned a judge who took me seriously enough to issue the order. Nathan would break the order and message me countless times, getting either a visit from the police or sometimes spending a night in jail. Nothing serious. After 15 years of this, I knew that as long as this man was alive, he would be a plague on my life. He'd never stop. He even told me so. About 2 years ago, he was messaging me about saying and killing his niece and killing my parents to teach me a lesson. An amazing new judge and a fresh criminal protective order. Later, Nathan was actually being prosecuted on felony stalking charges. Long story short, he was found guilty and incarcerated for about a year, which was the best year of my life. I didn't have to worry about waking up to violent messages or fear for my family's safety. He was released about 6 months ago and hadn't contacted me. However, about 2 weeks ago, he started messaging my best friend that he was dying of cancer. We didn't believe him at first, but it was true. Apparently, he was recently diagnosed with severe stage 4 stomach cancer. It only took a couple of weeks. He died yesterday. I want to feel pity for him. He grew up in an abusive house and had a debilitating unmedicated disorder. But to be honest, I cried tears of joy when I heard. I want to celebrate. I am so happy. Happy that this man can't hurt me or anyone I love anymore. Happy that his niece, who I believe probably was being SA'd by him, is free. I am happy that my stalker is dead.